Alright, this is the Odyssey by Homer. Introduction. This version of the Odyssey is, in its intention at any rate, a genuine translation, not a paraphrase nor a retold tale. At the same time, and within the rules I have set myself, I have done my best to make Homer easy reading for those who are unfamiliar with the Greek world. Nevertheless, they are bound to find here much that is strange, and I beg them to bear with me patiently through a few preliminary pages so that I might provide them beforehand with the answers to some of, at least, of the questions that will occur to them as they read. Homer's Iliad and Odyssey are from time to time afforded a first-class battleground to scholars. In the 19th century, in particular, German critics were at endless pains to show not only that the two works are not the product of a single brain, but that each is a piece of intricate and rather ill-sewn patchwork. In this process, Homer disappears. By now, he has been firmly re-established on his throne, and his readers may feel as sure that they are in one man's hands as they do when they turn to As You Like It after King John. Footnote. This is not to say that in so ancient a text, one or two lines here and there may not be later interpolations. Yet the only longer passage in the Odyssey, which I find valid reasons for suspecting is the beginning at 167 of Book 20, where Penelope is a prayer addressed to the goddess Artemis, tells her a story in which she, Artemis, is referred to in the third person. Alright, okay. But this restoration depends on a judicious re-examination of the internal evidence and has brought little new light to light about the man and his life. It is beyond question that he is the earliest surviving Greek writer, probable that he lived in the 10th century before Christ in one or other of those cities which the Greeks had established on the Aegean coast of Asia Minor, and quite likely that he actually committed his poems to writing, though that art was still perhaps hardly known save to the minstrel fraternity to which he belonged, the rest including his blindness, his legend or guesswork, and the reader who tries to glean from his poems something of the man as apart from his art will find himself baffled by the most impersonal and objective of authors. The Iliad and Odyssey are twin aspects of a single theme, the story of the Trojan War and its aftermath. Together they constitute the first expression of the Western mind in literary form, the earliest, at all events, which we possess, for it will be obvious even to those who read them in translation that two such masterpieces could not have sprung into being without artistic antecedents. In form they are epic poems, but it will perhaps make their content clearer to the modern reader if I describe the Iliad as a tragedy and the Odyssey as a novel. It is in the Iliad that we hear for the first time the authentic voice of the tragic muse, while the Odyssey, with its well-knit plot, its psychological interest, and its interplay of character, is a true ancestor of the long line of novels that have followed it. And though it is the first, I am not sure that it is not still the best, but let the new reader decide for himself. Each of the two poems is complete and independent as a work of art, with an atmosphere of its own. Yet, as we have seen, they share a common background in the Trojan War, and of this war something must now be said. The city of Troy, or Ilium, which in Homer's account was besieged for 10 years and finally sacked by the Greek king Agamemnon and his feudal supporters, had been identified by archaeologists with Hisarlik, an ancient settlement near the coast of the Aegean in the northwest corner of Asia Minor, whose remains show traces of repeated demolition and rebuilding. It is quite likely that a marauding force from European Greece played a destructive part in its checkered life. But this is not to say that Homer's account is to be taken as history. Homer was neither a historian nor an archaeologist. The very ideas of history and archaeology were non-existent in his day, and we shall be far nearer to the truth if we regard him as having worked up a mass of legendary and mythical material of very ancient date and well known to his hearers into a seemingly historical tale. His heroes and heroines were the supposed ancestors of the nobles before whom he recited his poems. It flatters his audience to hear that their doughty deeds and the absence of genuine pedigrees and records to imagine these divinely descended and godlike beings as separated from themselves by only a few generations. But in my view, a view that I express with some dissidence, for I feel that I may have many scholars against me, but in my view, at any rate, there are mythical and Homer's historical value to us lies not in his attempt to describe an actual past, but in a picture which, in the course of this attempt, he cannot help giving us of the life and manners of his own day. Before introducing the reader to the scene he will meet with in the Odyssey, we must briefly describe the action of the Iliad, which is no more than an episode in the 10 years siege of Troy. The ships of the Greek expeditionary force are lined up on the beach. The troops are encamped in huts beside them. The fighting takes place on the rolling plain between these huts and the city walls. Agamemnon, son of Atreus, the Greek overlord, with his brother Menelaus of Sparta, has induced the princes who owe him allegiance to join forces with him against Troy and Priam, its king, because Paris, one of Priam's many sons, has abducted Menelaus' wife, beautiful Helen. The narrative covers only the short period of Achilles' withdrawal from the fighting after a quarrel with Agamemnon, his resumption of arms, and the death at his hands of the Trojan prince Hector, whose body is recovered from Achilles for burial by the personal efforts of his father, King Priam. With Hector's funeral, the Iliad ends. Homer left it to the lesser epic poets who followed him to fill the story out at either end. His own work he resumed. There are some slight suggestions that he wrote the Iliad first. His own work he resumed in the Odyssey, which though with many a backward look at the actual fighting, starts at a point in the 10th year after its end and deals with the adventures of the Greek chieftains on their homeward way. Odysseus, king of Ithaca, an island off the western coast of Greece, is for artistic purposes selected as the central theme. Menelaus, Agamemnon, and Nestor receive special treatment. The adventures of Menelaus, indeed, are given at such length in the book 4, and bear so suggestive a resemblance to those of Odysseus that we are tempted to think that in the material at his disposal, Homer found the legend of the wandering prince attached to the names of both Menelaus and Odysseus, and gave us two versions of the tale. At any rate, there is a puzzle here for those who would have us believe that the pair are historical figures. Incidentally, it is noteworthy that apart from the death of Priam's daughter, Cassandra, Homer, who shows such meticulous care in winding up the Greek side of the business, concerns himself not at all with the destinies of the Trojans and their allies after the sack. But to return to the Odyssey, I am not going to spoil my readers' pleasure by the analysis of the plot. Homer is the world's best storyteller, and I can safely leave them in his hands. A few words, however, on the opening scenes may not come amiss. The tale begins with the Council of the Olympian gods, of whom more anon. In the 10th year after the fall of Troy, Zeus takes the chair. The comments first on the fate of Agamemnon, murdered on his return from Troy by Clytemnestra, his wife, and her lover, Aegisthus, a tragic tale which Homer introduces here and many times again, by way of pointing the contrast between Clytemnestra's infamy and the sterling virtue of Penelope, Odysseus' queen. Next, Odysseus himself is discussed, and it is felt that the unhappy wanderer, who mainly through the enmity of the sea god Poseidon has for 10 years failed to reach his home in Ithaca, should be brought back to his kingdom. At the moment, he is detained against his will in the remote island of Ogygia by the nymph Calypso, a lesser goddess who has for 7 years exercised her charms in vain upon him, and it is there in Book 5, that was before, Book 5 that we first meet him, and not till Book 4, Book 14, that we hear what he did in the first 3 years of his 10 years, wandering after the sack of Troy. Meanwhile, to return to Book 1, after suggesting that Hermes, the envoy of the gods, should be dispatched to release Odysseus, the goddess Athene, Odysseus' champion and protector, visits his place in Ithaca to stir his young son, Telemachus, to take active steps toward the discovery of his own long-lost father, or, failing this, to bring to an end the intolerable situation that has arisen during his long absence. For we find that his faithful wife Penelope is besieged in her own house by a host of amorous and ambitious princelings from Ithaca itself and the neighboring isles, each eager to wed the still attractive queen, and even more eager to step into King Odysseus' shoes. It is the doom of these suitors that is slowly but surely worked up to in the magnificent climax of Book 22. But I undertook that, 42? Oh, shit. But I undertook, I can't do the Roman numeral of this problem, but I undertook to introduce the reader only to the opening scene, nor, having done this, do I propose to add one more to the many appreciations of the Odyssey that have been penned. I will content myself by drawing his attention to one or two aspects of Homer's genius, which have struck me with even greater force during the long period of intimate study which translation involves than they did when I tackled him as a task at school. I put first the extraordinary insight, delicacy, and truth with which he handles his hero's relations with members of the other sex. I cannot simply say women, for at least 3 goddesses are involved, though they are by no means the less feminine for being divine. The Princess Nausicaa is a peculiarly attractive figure to modern readers. Some of us, steeped in the traditions of later fiction, may regret Homer's failure to pursue Nausicaa's romance to a more exciting conclusion, or may console ourselves by reading a broken heart into her last words with Odysseus. But Homer was neither a sex-ridden romantic nor an illusioned realist. With the happy result that his picture of Nausicaa is as very fresh and lovely now as when it was painted 3,000 years ago. Jesus, long time. Next, in an age which, in spite of 2 savage wars, is still too ready to look askance at the barbarity of its predecessors and to censure the occasional brutalities that Homer seems to condone, I cannot help dwelling on the sentiments which he expresses, or rather, in some subtle manner, causes us to feel. For all those whom fate or their own families have afflicted or cast down, I am thinking of the luckless young Elpenor, not much of a fighting man, nor very strong in the head, of the woman slave grinding corn in the hand mill, who was not so vigorous as the rest, of the stricken Calypso's lament, of Odysseus' mother pining in heartache for his wise and gentle ways, of the great Otis and Ephialtes, destroyed before the down came curling on their cheeks, of Cassandra's dying cry, which lingered so long in Agamemnon's ears, of the lonely Circe, decking herself out in vain to meet Odysseus, of the faithful Eumaeus, braving the inclement night to sleep with his pigs, of the Phoenician nurse cut off in the midst of a successful climb by Artemis with her gentle darts of the suitor Amphinamos, Amphinamos, a thoroughly decent fellow who had his warning but did not heed it, of the dog Argus, who too old and weak to greet his master with more than a wag of the tail, of the netted birds, who meet death where they had only looked to sleep, of the souls of the vanquished suitors, forming the deliverer down. Have a good one. I mean, I love you. Wait, I better brush my teeth. Good one. I've remembered that I need to brush my teeth. Probably, like, get a razor out and make myself look as slightly less stupid.